Hello everyone, it's Helena Bird. Have you been labouring under the misapprehension that you have to buy expensive paint palettes and then clean them out and wash them out and dry them out and then start the process all over again? There is an easier way, my friends, and I am here to share it with you. All you need is a magazine cover. In fact, you can probably do this with magazine pages that are glossy and maybe glue a couple together to make them a little bit more sturdy. Use your magazine pages or your magazine cover as a paint palette. Let the paint set. And then not only will you not have to clean it, but you'll be able to turn it into some amazing junk journal ephemera. Watch how I do that today and craft along with me. Let's get started. I don't care what anybody says. Sometimes it is truly amazing what can come out of being really lazy. Actually, to be honest, it's not just laziness that made me come up with this particular process. One of the things I've always hated about using paints of any variety is the process of cleaning them out and getting rid of the water that you use to clean your brush. Not because it's time consuming, although I didn't love that part of the process, but because it often ends up going, down the drain, or, what do you do with it? So there are sort of some time consuming ways of getting rid of paint out of your palette by letting them evaporate and things. And I've tried all of those because I don't want this going back into the water supply. I want to make sure that I'm being environmentally friendly as much as I can. I use a sink drainer when I wash out my water from my paint, so any solid is kept in that drainer and then that gets thrown in the bin. But it really was becoming quite time consuming to make sure that my paints weren't getting back into the water supply. I live right by the ocean and I don't want to hurt those little fishies. So one day I decided that really I could do my paint palette mixing on anything that is glossy. And I realised that magazine covers were very sturdy and very glossy. And they're often the bit that if you're a collage artist, you don't use in your collages because they're a little bit thicker than the other papers and thus stand proud of the other things you've glued down in your collage. So I have obviously just glued this magazine page down to some cardboard, some junk cardboard, could be anything, could be cereal box, could be packaging paper, whatever you want. And I've cut it into 4. I then decided that I was going to add clusters to the top of the tag. And can I just ask you to exercise a note of caution if you're going to do exactly what I do in the video? That pokey tool that I'm using, it's really sharp. So please make sure when you are poking through the cardboard and you're poking through the fabric that you are looking where the point is going. I don't mean to patronise, but honestly, I have had some very near misses with this tool, and I consider myself a relatively responsible grown-up. So I wouldn't want anybody having any accidents after watching my tutorial. So please, pretty please, watch where that sharp point is going when you're pushing it through things. And if in doubt, get some blue tack or some foam and put it behind what you're pressing into and let the point go into that. I recently did a video on 10 ways to top a tag, and what's quite funny is that I never mentioned clusters in that video, and it is a good way of using a lot of bits of fabric and lace, especially if they're kind of scrappy little pieces where you're not going to be able to really use them for anything else. I was quite new to junk journaling when I first made that video on topping tags, and the thing I posted recently was a re-edit of that video because the first edit of that video was terrible. I was terrible at editing videos when I started YouTube. I will link it below, the re-edited version, in case you want to check it out. And if you're as tag mad as me, you're always looking for new ways to top your tags. But as you can see, all I'm doing here is I am layering the lace up and I am pushing my pokey tool through it, and then I'm adding a brad. The most difficult thing of that whole process is getting the brad through all the bits of lace with its 2 little feet together. And I've watched other tutorials where people have done this and they all agree, okay? So if you're struggling with getting that brad through with its 2 feet together, you are not alone, my friend. And that third one that I've just done, that took me quite a while to get the brad through the fabric. So persevere, take it easy. And if you find yourself getting frustrated, just put it down and come back to it later. It's all fine. It's just crafting at the end of the day. So by the time I've got these clusters on the top of the tags, I actually really like the way they look. But there are a couple of final things that I want to do to them. One of them, if you want to do it this way, the way that I did it, where I glue the kind of cardboard or brown paper to the back of the tag first and then push the brad through, you're going to have these little feet poking out the back. I don't care about this, folks. This is not something that I am worried about. Junk journaling for me is about not worrying about these little things showing. But I just put some washi tape over and made sure it was really pressed down. If you want to avoid that, then you could put the brad through before you glue the piece of cardboard on the back. I think you will still see a little bump though. So that's just part of this project, just part of the end result. If you want to cover it up and you've got some bright ideas as to how, then do let us know in the comments. You might notice that I cannot leave well enough alone when it comes to these tags. I could have left them all painty and cute, but no. I have to go in with my pens, Posca pens and acrylic gold pen, and make some marks, because although there was nothing wrong with the tag that I made, just as it was, in fact, it was very beautiful, I always am looking for moments in my crafting where I can hone my art skills further, where I can get over the fear of putting crayon or pen to paper and making shapes, because I have a little bit of a long and potted history with art and kind of the fear of making art. So wherever possible, I try and make marks on everything and essentially try and practice my skills. So for me, this is less about how pretty the finished result looks and more about what I can do today, what I get to do today with my art materials. So you can totally leave your lovely palette tag without any marks on it whatsoever, and I still think it looks really cool. I don't think you need to do any of this extra crayoning and acrylic marker penning that I'm doing. But for me personally, crafting and art kind of go hand in hand, and I am trying to hone my skills on both every single time I do a project. And look how I'm just getting used to loosening up here. I'm just scribbling all over, keeping my hand really loose and not worrying at all too much about what this looks like. I just want to get my hand used to and relaxed in that space of using the crayon. In this one, I actually did try and make some vague flowers with my marks. And they're very abstract, very impressionist, they're not real flowers. But I just thought, since the shapes on the card already lent itself to that I would follow the lines around and do that. And then I did the exact opposite on this last tag. I just scribbled for all I was worth in contrasting colours. And do you know how much fun that was? Scribbling is fun. And I really loved the finished result where it had all these contrasting colours. So that is really the process. And if you want to put a finishing touch to it, you can, of course, ink around. I'm not going to show you every last bit of inking I did because it's quite time consuming. And I think you know what it looks when somebody inks around a tag. If you're new to the fold, trust me, after about 3 tutorials, you will have seen someone ink around a tag about, at least 20 times. It's fine. So you're going to know what that looks like very quickly. So here are some close-ups of the finished tags. Something else I should flag here, because again, some people be like, well, you know what, it looked better before you put all those marks on it, and I'm not sure about that. That's okay for you to feel that way, and that is you looking at a piece of work that I've done and gone, that's cool, but I wouldn't actually do that. And that's part of what these tutorials are all about. I'm going to do something, and you might have thought, I would have left it at the previous stage. For me, I am trying to figure out in my art how I create something that is truly unique and truly mine. And in this case, I've done it just out of leftover paint. So for me, that's a big win. They're unique, they're a little bit crazy, just like me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and it opens some new things up in your crafting and maybe even your art. There'll be another video soon. Until then, take care and I'll see you next time.